Yeah, buddy. We're back. We're back and we're swanky, dude. I'm feeling that intro vibe. Dude, is it just like a sunny day and you're in your own little space, just got the headphones in, strolling down Sunset Boulevard? Because that's kind of where I'm at. Welcome back to the Extremely Average Fantasy Football Podcast. I'll keep bumping the video and audio with my knee throughout this podcast. This is a quick one, y'all. I just want to dive in. Preseason is coming up. It's like people have already done their drafts. I'm not on top of things. Why? Because I'm average, man. We're just trying to get through life and have some fun with fantasy football while doing it. But this is a big weekend for drafts, and so it's not too late if you want to get involved. This one here, just a quick 101. What is fantasy football? And we're going to jump right in. Fantasy football, it's a fantasy. It's a fake sport. It is a game. The game exists, but it doesn't count for anything other than like between you and your friends or you and your league mates, the people that are in your fake league. It is using real life NFL players. And there's a direct correlation between their performance on the field on game day versus how many points that your fake team gets. Okay, so you have this group of real NFL players that you have hand selected to be on your fake team, and those real NFL players go out and they perform week in and week out, and how they perform, it's directly reflected on your fake team. You, a real person, fake play another real person in a head-to-head style format, and whoever's fake team has the highest points wins that matchup. I know there's a lot of real and a lot of fake, but basically I would go through and I would select players that I want to be on my team. A friend of mine would do the same thing. Our two fake teams are scored up as the games go on, and between me and my buddy, whoever has the highest score, they win that matchup. They win that week, and then it goes over the course of the NFL season. And so you're playing through, 16, 17 weeks, depending on how long the NFL season. This is 2023. I believe it's an 18-week season. I don't know because I'm average. But usually you play 1 week less than the actual NFL season. And you come out with a championship, and you hope that you don't get last. You don't want to be the winner of the toilet bowl. You want to be the winner of the fantasy football championship. That's a quick little rundown. So, how do you get players on your team? There is a fantasy football draft. So like a fake draft, the NFL does a real draft, and then us peons, us civilians, we do a fake fantasy football draft. And so you would get together with your friends. You would decide on a date and a time that you want to have this draft. And then you sit down for a couple of hours and you go around the room, and everybody gets to take turns picking which player that they want. Typically, this can be done. It's mostly done in like a snake style draft. There's a whole bunch of nuanced stuff out there, but if you're just starting, most likely it is a snake draft, meaning that you say you can have anywhere from 10 people to 14 people in your fantasy football league. It's just that group that you go head to head against each week. 12 is kind of the magic number, so that's what we're going to use for this. So it would be you and 11 other people. And then someone would have the first pick, someone would have the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, 11th, and then 12th. If we're in a snake draft, it would go 1 through 12, and then 12 back to 1, and then 1 up to 12, and then 12 back to 1. That's how you kind of get the snake style. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. To kind of give you an idea. Also, you might hear there's going to be a lot of stuff going on. I'm in LA. The dog's running around jumping. The neighbors blasting music. I got kids riding bicycles right outside of the window. So I apologize for any kind of noise, but we're average. We're not in a studio. We're in my apartment because we're average, baby. Okay, so we go around and we choose who we want. And it can be any player from any team. You do not have to select the same teammates if you don't want to. You could do that. If you love the Eagles, then you could have Jalen Hurts. You could have A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert. You could pick all 50 of their running backs as well. But most of the time, you kind of want to spread out your chances. Right? Like I love a Jamar Chase as my wide receiver. I like Nick Chubb as my running back. And so you pick these players and they can be on different teams in real life. And then that makes up your fantasy team. So that is the draft. I'll have another video out about draft strategy and kind of what that looks like. But that's how you get players on your roster. In a typical 12-man league and a typical 12-team, 12-person league, you're going to have your starters and you're going to have your bench. And for your starters, most likely, it's going to be 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, a flex position, which can be a running back, wide receiver, or a tight end. Any of those positions would be eligible for that flex spot. And then you have a defense and a kicker, typically. And then your bench, somewhere around like 6 bench spots. And you try to pick who you think is going to score the most that week. You put those into your starting roster and everybody else would go on the bench. It only counts your starting roster. Okay, so you try to pick the best players you think, because you're going to have more than just 2 running backs on your team. There's just 2 running backs to start. You might have another 2 or 3 or 4 on your bench. And so you pick the best 2 that you think are going to start, or that you think are going to have the highest points for that game. You put that into your starting lineup. It only counts the starters. It does not count the bench. So it doesn't matter if somebody just goes off on your bench. That is part of the fantasy football turmoil that we deal with week in and week out as fantasy football managers. Okay, so we know what fantasy football is. We know how to get them. We got to do a draft. You don't need to have like 11 other people that you know in real life to be able to do this. If you want to jump into fantasy football, you can jump into an online platform like ESPN, Yahoo. Sleeper is one that's really up and coming that you can try out. Any of those, there's other ones as well, Underdog. There's a lot of different options, and most of the time it is free to play. So if you're looking to just get started, you don't really know what's going on. My recommendation, ESPN is probably the most user-friendly for beginners. I would argue that Yahoo probably has like better statistics and numbers and things that you're going to look for as you kind of get used to it. Sleeper might be better than both of them. This is actually my first year with Sleeper, so I don't have that much experience with it. Up until this point, it's really been Yahoo and ESPN out there. So All right, we've signed up. We've picked our players. We know that it's got to be a starting lineup, and that's pretty much it. You just kind of go in, set your lineup with who you think is going to perform the best. Most of the time, if it's a quarterback, it's usually like every 15 yard or 20 yards per a completion gets you 1 point. A touchdown could give you 4 points or 6 points depending on your format. And if you run for 10 yards, that's a point. That's kind of how it is. So their performance in real life does directly affect your fake team. Fake game played with real people. You try to select the best starting roster every week and try to get yourself into a championship. And so that's basically the gist of it. Then there's things that you'll learn when you go through the draft. There'll be an option for ADP, average draft position. So there is some vocab that you kind of need to know. If you are going through on your first time, it's tough to go wrong if you just stick with ADP. You'll move off of that the more drafts that you do. But if you follow ADP, typically you're going to do fine. There's symbols: QB for quarterback, RB for running back, WR for wide receiver, TE for tight end. Flex is usually spelled out FLEX. Defense is usually under DST for defense special teams. There's your DST. Kicker with a K, and then bench. Those are your roster spots. Waiver wire is kind of something that you need to know throughout the season. The waiver wire is basically the pool of athletes that did not get picked during the draft. So it's kind of the free agents, quote unquote free agents. These people might be playing on an actual team, but when it comes to your fantasy football league, they are free agents. And so you can find, if you pick somebody up and they are a dud, or, heaven forbid, if they get injured and they're done for the season, you drop somebody off of your team, you go to the waiver wire to pick up somebody who's not on a roster at that point. There's also FAB, free agent acquisition budget. If you are in a beginner league, probably do not do FAB. It is for basically bidding on players that are on the waiver wire. Bidding after the draft is done, everyone already has their teams. Week to week, people can bid on players to pick them up and add them to their roster. So that's FAB. PPR, half PPR, standard. Those are scoring formats. PPR is point per reception. Half PPR is a half a point per reception. And standard scoring is 0 points per reception. So if you have a running back that's catching a lot of passes, if they catch a pass in a half PPR format, they're going to get half a point just for catching that pass. If you're in a full PPR, then they would get 1 full point for every pass that they catch. Same thing with receivers or tight ends or anybody. PPR is point per reception. If you're starting out, probably go with a half PPR format or a standard PPR format. When you get into PPR, you really have to look at your pass catching running backs versus just your regular ground and pound kind of style running backs. When it comes to tight ends, you want, they may not score a lot of touchdowns, but you're looking for people that catch a lot of passes too. So it kind of alters how you draft. So I would recommend either a standard or a half point system if you're just starting out. Also, what kind of league are you getting into? There's a dynasty league, a keeper league, a redraft league. Redraft is what you want to look for if you're just starting out. That means that you are drafting just for one season, and after the season's done, your roster goes blank and we start all over the next year. There's also a keeper league that you can do if you draft somebody at a value. Maybe you drafted them later on in the draft and they end up being a great player and just pop off that year, and you want to keep them. You can keep them into the next year under a keeper league. Dynasty you're basically managing your own team year to year to year to year. So you want to look for those value picks. You're going to keep that same roster year to year. It doesn't start over. So if you're just starting, you want to get, you don't want any fab, you don't want any free agent acquisition budget. Just go with a standard or a half PPR kind of a thing. And then you want to do a redraft league where it just starts over every week. You can also, we talked about free agents and the waiver wire. You can also accumulate players through trades. So if I have somebody that is good, but I just don't need them on my roster spot, my roster's looking pretty good, they're just sitting on the bench every week, I might try to go out and get somebody that I might be able to use. So if I picked wide receivers earlier on in the draft and I waited on running backs, so my wide receivers are really strong, but my running backs are kind of weak, maybe I look for somebody who did the opposite. Maybe somebody has a strong core of running backs and weak wide receivers, where I can trade one of my receivers for a running back, or a receiver to receiver, a receiver to tight end, receiver to quarterback. Player for player, you can trade amongst your league mates. The last thing that I would be cautious of, or just aware of, not cautious, is a bye week. So if we're playing, we kind of need to know what bye weeks are. Bye weeks are weeks where certain teams will not play that week. They get an off week. So you don't want to start somebody in your starting roster who is on a bye week, because that means that they have an off week and they're not going to be playing. I know it's a lot. It can be, but to break it down, it can be super easy. Just get yourself in in just any kind of league. You can go to ESPN, go to Yahoo, sign up for whatever date and time works for you for the draft, because that's really important. And then go into the draft, pick players that you want. You have a team. And have fun throughout the season. Just know, whatever roster you start with is not going to be the one that you end with. So have fun with it. Go out there and pick the people that you're excited to watch. And it really... it helps you, you communicate with the people throughout the season. And so it's fun to communicate with other people. It's fun to watch games that you may not watch. Typically, I'm not a big Cleveland Browns fan, but if I have Nick Chubb as my running back, I'll probably be watching the Browns quite a bit. And so it kind of gets you out of just watching the same team over and over and over. You get to watch other games and be excited about it because you might have a player inside of there. And it's really, really fun, especially if you're just starting and you're not putting any kind of money or anything on it. You get online and just have fun with it, play around, see what it's about, ask your friends, just have a good time. So I hope that kind of helps introduce what fantasy football is. If I left anything out, just throw it in the comments. I'll be happy to ask that. If you're watching on YouTube, I don't know if there's an option to do that. If you're listening, then you can find me. Go to the description of this podcast episode, and it's going to have a link where you can find me on Instagram. You can find me on TikTok, on YouTube, Spotify, Apple. I'm everywhere on there, and even my email address will be out there. So you can shoot me an email. You can comment on this podcast. Comment on a different post, whatever, and I'll get back to you, baby, because I'm average. Nobody's hitting me up. I got the time. But welcome back. I hope that everybody has a fun 2023 season. We're gearing up. We're learning about the players. And we're getting ready for your draft. Get out there and get you some, baby. Let's get some football on Extremely Average Fantasy Football Podcast with your host, Clayton Hill. I'll see y'all next time.